With more kindness in the world, we'd have less cruelty and less suffering. With more hope, we'd have less cynicism and less fear. With just a little more empathy, the world would be a better place. Few people can argue with that, but considering how vast the world is, how different we all are, from a practical standpoint, how do we make that happen? Jacob Lawrence reminds us that when the subject is strong, simplicity is the only way to treat it. With that in mind, I would like to propose a simple and practical idea that could inspire positive change on a global scale in a lasting and measurable way. It's called the Calendar Project. The Calendar Project is a proposal to reform the calendar by renaming the 12 months of the year in favor of virtues by means of a global vote. For example, instead of naming the first month January, it would be called the month of compassion, or wisdom, or gratitude, or whatever word we collectively choose as the most worthy of our attention. And the same would go for all other months. Now, as radical as this may sound, as daunting and unlikely as it may be, the question remains, is the idea of renaming the months in favor of virtues a proposal worthy of serious consideration? I believe the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Here are 10 reasons why. Number 1, 97% of all people use the same calendar. Even though China, India, and other countries still use traditional calendars for religious purposes, as of 2016, with the exception of Iran, Afghanistan, and Ethiopia, all other countries on Earth officially use the same system for organizing time, the Gregorian calendar. Introduced in 1582 by Pope Gregory VIII as a way to realign the time of Easter with the vernal equinox, the Gregorian calendar is a refinement of the Julian calendar, which in turn is a modification of the Roman calendar, an ancient system dating back to at least 700 BC. How the Gregorian calendar came to be known as the world's international civil calendar is a long, complicated story involving war, trade, imperialism, and plain old convenience. Number 2, the names of the months are meaningless. Since the global adoption of a single calendar gradually took place over the course of centuries, many distinct languages, from English to Arabic, Russian to Hindi, Hebrew to Spanish, use the same root Latin words to describe the months. A curious thing is, though, most of those words are completely inappropriate. So inappropriate, in fact, that they could be called meaningless. Especially since the calendar is now a multinational instrument belonging to all people of all countries equally. For example, the words April and May, both rooted in ancient Roman culture, were likely chosen because of their relationship to spring. This makes sense for people who live in the Northern Hemisphere, but makes little sense to anyone south of the equator, as those 2 months actually occur during the fall. We also have July and August, named after self-appointed dictators, Julius and Augustus Caesar, and the month of March, named after none other than Mars, the Roman god of war. Finally, we have the 4 months from September to December that receive their names from the Latin numbers 7, 8, 9, and 10, numbers that clearly do not reflect their actual placement on the calendar. It's easy to understand how the words we use to name the months can be viewed as meaningless, but why exchange them for virtues? Because of number 3. Virtues are the cornerstone of all cultures and all religions. From the food we eat to the clothes we wear or the way we talk, the human family is a vast multitude of beliefs, traditions, and cultures spanning all parts of the globe from the Polynesian Islands to the Arctic Circle. But despite those differences, there are certain things that almost all people have in common, like the need for love and appreciation, or a desire to raise children who are honest and kind. Those basic virtues, or character traits as they're often called, are inherent in all human beings, regardless of where they come from or how they live. But to navigate any social setting with members of equal needs and desires requires some basic ground rules in order to maintain good relations. One of the most universal and widely accepted of such rules is the Golden Rule, which states that one should do unto others as they would have others do unto them. Through organizations like the Parliament of the World's Religions, representatives from all major faiths have acknowledged the centrality of the Golden Rule, or virtue of reciprocity, within their respective teachings. Equally endorsed by the United Nations, the significance of the Golden Rule has also been recognized by most philosophical and secular systems of morality. Throughout history, numerous groups and individuals have discovered that several other virtues besides reciprocity can be found amongst the world's religions. The most notable of those groups was a team of psychologists who founded the field of positive psychology by first analyzing the writings of Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, ancient Greek philosophy, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The ancient traditions found to have the most profound influence upon human civilization. What their research revealed was a convergence of 6 core virtues: courage, temperance, justice, humanity, wisdom, and transcendence across time, place, and intellectual tradition. Number 4. Virtues are also foundational to human flourishing. Whether we're talking about life satisfaction, personal success, peace of mind, flourishing, thriving, or well-being, over the last few decades, scientific literature has become clear. Virtues such as compassion, hope, gratitude, and forgiveness are an indispensable part of those positive mindsets. Or as Pauline Kezibir, a researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison puts it, the body of findings documenting the link between virtues and happiness is quite robust. Virtues are what make it possible for us to live well together with others, to have resilience in the face of adversity, to flourish, and to achieve the good life. As the last quote suggests, research shows that virtues are not only indispensable in the pursuit of personal success, but they're also key ingredients of a thriving family, community, school, workplace, and all other forms of social organization. Kim Cameron, a leading expert on organizational effectiveness, wrote, "Virtueness has been described as the best of the human condition, the most ennobling behaviors and outcomes, the excellence and essence of mankind, and the highest aspirations of human beings." Number 5. Despite their importance, virtues are actually in decline. Since we live in an age where news travels across the planet in mere seconds, you would think that virtues, being as important as they are, would be all over the media. But the reality is, they're actually in decline. Using Google Books Archive, twin sisters Pauline and Celine Kezibir, in a joint project between the London Business School and Colorado University, tracked the frequency in which 50 virtue words like patience and honesty appeared in American books between the years of 1901 and 2000. What they discovered was a significant decline in 74% of the words studied. But it's not just in books. Others have also noted a similar pattern in song lyrics, advertisements, children's books, and newspaper articles. The question that immediately comes to mind is why? Why is it that despite overwhelming evidence of the importance of cultivating virtues, are they in decline? Though the answer to that question is no doubt complex, in this day and age, a likely contributor could be the fact that no matter how important a message may be, it has to contend with the millions of other messages competing for our attention. And since the mind can only hold one thought at a time, important concepts like patience and wisdom are largely forgotten. They're out of sight and out of mind. Number 6. The calendar is the perfect instrument to promote virtues. It just so happens that the calendar is perfectly suited to rise above the media clutter in an effort to promote virtues for 3 main reasons: reach, frequency, and longevity. Reach. As stated in point number 1, the World Civil Calendar is an instrument used by over 97% of every man, woman, and child on Earth for a total reach of 7.3 billion people. Frequency. As reach refers to how many of us use the calendar, frequency pertains to how often we interact with it. Here are a few stats. According to Times Magazine, the average American checks their smartphone 46 times per day, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that number applies to 185 million users. As explained in the article, this means that smartphone home screens in the United States are glanced at over 8 billion times each and every day. And one thing all smartphone home screens do is display the name of the month. Then there's the fact that most houses and businesses in the world have at least one physical calendar hanging somewhere. Or how most children not only memorize the names of the months from an early age, but also write down the date 3 to 4 times a day, from grade 1 to graduation. Do you know who else writes the date multiple times a day? Doctors, lawyers, judges, police officers, politicians, bankers, CEOs, people that happen to be some of society's most influential, whose tendencies towards kindness or cruelty, empathy or indifference, matter in the lives of so many others. Longevity. Since the majority of our months received their names over 2,700 years ago, there is no reason why a new naming system can't last at least that long, or longer if we collectively choose. So, considering how often we're exposed to the words used to describe our months, renaming them in favor of words that are not only profoundly significant, but also universally valued makes sense. Not only does this make sense, but we can say with absolute certainty that changing the name of any month for the word compassion would, over time, create a more compassionate world. And we can say this with absolute certainty because of number 7, the mere exposure effect. Professional sports stadiums like FedEx Field, Toyota Center, and Minute Maid Park, product placements in 75% of all network television shows, brand names plastered over billboards and park benches, city buses, representing a small fraction of the 3,000 plus ads most of us see on a daily basis, all take advantage of what has been referred to as one of the most stable and verified phenomena in all of social psychology, the mere exposure effect, which basically states that the more we're exposed to something, the more positive emotions we associate with it. It's the main reason why advertising, in all its forms, works so well. But the mere exposure effect doesn't just apply to tangible goods. It also applies to the songs we hear, the people we meet, or, in this particular case, the virtues we're exposed to on a daily basis. Number 8. Taking this approach gives us access to a powerful promotional instrument. As stated, the purpose of this video is to explore the idea of using the calendar as a means to promote virtues. Now, let's say, hypothetically speaking, that the calendar were already used as a promotional tool in the traditional sense, as in, companies could purchase the naming rights for the months like they do for sports stadiums. What would it be worth? Well, the first step in estimating the calendar's promotional value would be to determine its CPM, or cost per thousand impressions, a standard measurement that varies greatly from one medium to another. For example, The CPM for a typical billboard is $3 per thousand, while the CPM for a commercial during last Super Bowl cost $45, which explains why 30-second ads during that game cost $5 million to air. Considering how often we interact with the calendar, it's safe to assume a hypothetical CPM far greater than the average billboard. In fact, one could even argue that the average person has a higher daily exposure to the name of the month than to any one commercial, regardless of when or where that commercial was aired. But for this experiment, we'll give the calendar a mid-range CPM of 20, as in $20 per thousand people per day. Now, all we have to do is take 7.3 billion, the amount of us using the calendar, divide that by 1,000, and multiply that by the $20 CPM, which comes up to 146 million per day, or a yearly minimal promotional value of $53 billion. Obviously, humanity would never agree to sell its calendar to corporate sponsors. The point of this exercise is simply to demonstrate how valuable a promotional instrument the calendar would be if we chose to use it that way. Most importantly, if the months were renamed in favor of elected virtues, maintaining the high level of exposure those virtues would receive by merging them with the calendar would cost us essentially nothing. Which brings us to number 9. We can use all the help we can get. There's been a lot of talk recently about upcoming technologies like genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence. Technologies that promise to revolutionize all aspects of our lives. But, like money, those technologies are neither good nor bad. They're simply tools. The only thing ensuring those tools are used to cure diseases and not build weapons are the inherent virtues of the people who use them. As we enter a future of unprecedented uncertainty, only one thing can be said for sure. We can use all the help we can get. For that reason, even if using the calendar as a way to promote empathy and kindness had an effect on less than 1% of the world's population, it would still be worth it. Now, despite the clear advantage of renaming the months, convincing a majority of the world's population to support a calendar reform, something that hasn't happened in over 400 years, is a massively huge undertaking, to say the least. Which brings us to our final point. Number 10, we may be closer than we think. Recognizing the greater aspects of humanity is not just a recent shift in the social sciences. It's also taking place in civil society and the faith community. Here are a few examples to show you what I mean. After winning the TED Prize in 2008, Karen Armstrong went on to form the Charter of Compassion, a document drafted by representatives from all 5 major religions, including contributions from 150,000 people in 180 countries. The document's central message, according to Karen, is to remind people of the core similarity that lies at the heart of all religions, the Golden Rule. The Charter, which in the words of Rabbi David Saperstein, is the most collaborative undertaking of religious communities in history, has been endorsed by over 2 million people, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In 2007, in a book titled Blessed Unrest, author Paul Hawken reveals a movement comprised of over 1 million independent organizations working towards the common goals of environmental sustainability and social justice, a continuing trend that's also been described by Naomi Klein as the movement of movements. In 2010, Warren Buffett, along with Bill and Melinda Gates, founded an organization called The Giving Pledge, an organization made up of billionaires committed to donating at least 50% of their personal wealth to charity. The Giving Pledge now has a growing list of 170 members, showing us all that even some of the so-called 1% are deeply committed to creating a better world. Now, as inspiring as those achievements may be, realistically, a motion to reform the calendar could only happen by consensus of the world's United Nations. Which brings me to the most inspiring fact of all, the fact that most nations in the world today have already recognized the importance of cultivating virtues, as evident by the character education programs currently active within their schools. In conclusion, the official calendar of a nation is known as the civil calendar. The word civil means both of the common people and also happens to define high moral virtue. It appears that the word civil perfectly describes what this calendar is. In other words, all the reform would really be doing is creating a true civil calendar, not just by name, but also by definition. In light of how susceptible we all are to influence and how the greater aspects of humanity require continual support in order to flourish, we can begin to see how a decline in virtues in the world today is not a religious problem, a scientific problem, or a problem with the education system. Nor at its core is it a political problem. It's simply a marketing challenge. Marketers know that with an effective advertising campaign, you can sell pretty much anything. The bottom line is this: if we want a world that's more tolerant and compassionate towards others, that's courageous and patient in times of difficulty, a world that's also honest and hopeful and grateful and wise, a world that values optimism, diversity, equality, and unity, then we do what all advertisers and marketers do and apply the mere exposure effect. From a cost-benefit point of view, there is no greater return on our collective effort than to add our most valued words to the world's civil calendar. So, is the proposal by which we exchange the meaningless names of the calendar months in favor of virtues an idea worthy of serious consideration? I think it is. What do you think?